My fiancé's sister demanded to wear a white dress to our wedding because she looks better in it. When I said no, she showed up in one anyway and cried when I kicked her out. I never thought my wedding day would end with my new sister-in-law being escorted out in tears while wearing a white dress that rivaled my own. But that's exactly what happened, and the fallout has been catastrophic. My fiancé Jake and I had been together for 5 years before he proposed. We met during our senior year of college at a mutual friend's birthday party. Jake was this tall, kind-hearted guy with a passion for architecture and a smile that made my heart flutter. We clicked instantly, and by the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans for coffee the following week. Over the years, our relationship had its ups and downs, but we always managed to work through our problems with open communication and mutual respect. When Jake proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains last year, I didn't hesitate to say yes. We were perfect together, and I couldn't wait to start our life as husband and wife. That's when I met his family. Jake's parents seemed nice enough. His dad was reserved but polite, and his mom welcomed me with open arms. His sister Madison, however, was a different story altogether. Madison was 2 years younger than Jake, but acted like she was still in high school despite being 26. From the moment we met, I could tell something was off. She barely acknowledged me during that first dinner, spending most of the time showing Jake photos on her phone and reminiscing about inside jokes I wasn't part of. When she did address me, it was with this tight-lipped smile that never reached her eyes. "So you're the one who's taken my brother away," she said while helping clear the dinner plates. "He used to come home every weekend before you, you know." I laughed awkwardly, assuming she was joking. "Well, we do live 2 hours away, but I'm sure we'll visit more often now that the wedding planning is starting." She just hummed in response, an unreadable expression crossing her face. Over the next few months, Madison's behavior only got worse. She'd forget to include me in family text chains, address wedding-related questions directly to Jake instead of both of us, and make passive-aggressive comments about everything from my career choice to the way I styled my hair. "Are you sure about that shade of blonde? It washes you out a bit," she'd say. Or, "Teaching elementary school is so admirable." I could never settle for something so simple. Jake noticed it too, but insisted that Madison was just protective of him. "She's always been like this," he'd explain. "She'll warm up to you once she realizes you're not going anywhere." But as our wedding approached, Madison's behavior escalated from annoying to alarming. It started with the engagement party. I'd chosen a simple cream-colored dress, not quite white, but close enough for a bride-to-be. Madison showed up in an almost identical dress, only hers was tighter, shorter, and definitely more revealing. When my maid of honor commented on the similarity, Madison just shrugged and said, "Great minds think alike, I guess." Then came the bridal shower, where Madison gave me lingerie 3 sizes too small in front of all my friends and family. "I thought you could use some motivation before the big day," she said with a smirk, causing uncomfortable laughter from the guests. But the final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding when we had our final dress fittings. I'd chosen a classic A-line gown with delicate lace detailing and a modest train. Nothing too extravagant, but I felt beautiful in it. My bridesmaids would be wearing sage green dresses that complemented the spring garden venue we'd selected. Madison was supposed to wear the same bridesmaid dress as everyone else. I'd even let her choose the specific style from the designer's collection, wanting her to feel comfortable despite our strained relationship. But when she came out of the dressing room, my heart sank. Instead of the sage green dress we'd agreed on, Madison was wearing a floor-length white gown with a sweetheart neckline and beaded details that looked disturbingly similar to my wedding dress. The bridal shop attendant looked mortified, glancing between us with wide eyes. "Madison, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "That's not the bridesmaid dress we chose." She twirled around, admiring herself in the mirror. "I know, but doesn't this look so much better on me? The green makes me look sallow, but white really brings out my tan." I stared at her, speechless. Was this some kind of joke? "You can't wear white to my wedding," I finally managed to say. It's inappropriate." Madison rolled her eyes. "That's such an outdated tradition. Besides, you've already got Jake. Do you really need to be the only one who looks good that day?" My mother, who had been quietly observing, stepped in. "Madison, dear, it's standard etiquette not to wear white to someone else's wedding. It's Emma's special day." Madison's face hardened. "Well, I think it's stupid, and Jake won't care. He always says I look best in white." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Madison, I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable with you wearing white to our wedding. Please choose either the green dress we agreed on or another color. Anything but white or cream." She stared at me for a long moment, then stormed back into the dressing room without a word. When she emerged, she was back in her street clothes, the white dress flung over her arm. "Fine," she snapped. "I'll wear something else." I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Madison seemed to accept my decision, even showing me pictures of a blue dress she was considering. Jake was relieved when I told him the situation had been resolved, although he was disappointed in his sister's behavior. "I'll talk to her again," he promised. "She needs to understand that this kind of stuff isn't okay." "Thank you," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I really want us all to get along, especially on our wedding day. The weekend before the wedding was chaos. Last-minute vendor confirmations, welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, and rehearsal dinner preparations. I barely had time to worry about Madison, trusting that Jake's conversation with her had made an impact. Our wedding day arrived, sunny and perfect. The garden venue looked like something out of a fairy tale, with white chairs lined up on the lush green lawn and flowers blooming everywhere. I spent the morning getting ready with my bridesmaids, including Madison, who was conspicuously absent. Jake's mother assured me she was just running late and would be at the venue soon. As I put the finishing touches on my makeup, my maid of honor burst into the bridal suite, her face pale. "Emma, we have a problem," she said, closing the door behind her. "Madison just arrived and she's wearing white." My stomach dropped. "What? Are you sure?" "I'm sure. It's a white dress, floor-length fitted with a small train. It looks like a wedding dress, Emma." I closed my eyes, willing this not to be happening. Not today. Not after everything we'd discussed. "Where is she now?" I asked. "In the second dressing room. Your mom intercepted her before she could join the other bridesmaids." I stood up, smoothing down my dress. "I need to talk to her." My maid of honor grabbed my arm. "Are you sure? You don't need this stress right before the ceremony." "I'm sure. This needs to be dealt with now." I made my way to the second dressing room, my heart pounding. When I opened the door, there was Madison, admiring herself in the mirror. The dress was even worse than I'd imagined. Pure white, form-fitting, with lace details that echoed my own gown. She'd even styled her hair in an updo similar to mine. "Madison," I said quietly, "what are you doing?" She turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, Emma, don't you love it? I found it last minute and couldn't resist." "We talked about this. You agreed not to wear white." She shrugged. "I changed my mind. White just looks so good on me, and this dress was on sale." I took a deep breath. "Madison, you need to change. Right now. Or you can't be in the wedding." Her smile faltered. "What?" "You heard me. This is disrespectful, and you know it. Either change into the green dress we agreed on, or you won't be standing up there with us today." Madison's face contorted with anger. "You can't do that. Jake would never allow it. Jake and I are a team. He already knows about the dress incident at the fitting, and he supports me." "You're bluffing," she spat. "He always takes my side." I was done with this conversation. "You have 30 minutes to change. If you're not in the green dress by then, don't bother coming to the ceremony." I turned to leave, but Madison called out after me. "You're making a huge mistake. Jake won't forgive you for this." I closed the door behind me, hands shaking. Had I done the right thing? Would Jake really support me? Or would this create a rift between us on our wedding day? I didn't have to wonder long. As I returned to the bridal suite, I found Jake waiting for me, still in his street clothes, as he wouldn't get dressed until closer to the ceremony. "My mom just told me what's happening," he said, looking concerned. "Is Madison really wearing white?" I nodded, fighting back tears. "I told her she needs to change or she can't be in the wedding. I'm sorry if that was too harsh, but—" "No," Jake interrupted, taking my hands. "You did exactly the right thing. I'm the one who should be apologizing. I thought she'd respect our conversation, but clearly she's determined to cause problems." Relief flooded through me. "So you're okay with me asking her to change?" "More than okay. In fact, I'll go talk to her myself right now. This is our day, Emma. I won't let my sister ruin it with her childish behavior." As Jake left to confront Madison, I returned to my bridesmaids, trying to calm my nerves and refocus on the joy of the day ahead. 30 minutes later, my maid of honor returned with an update. "Madison refused to change," she said grimly. "Jake tried reasoning with her, then his parents tried, but she wouldn't budge. She said if you're forcing her to choose between being in the wedding or wearing her dress, she chooses the dress." I closed my eyes, a mix of anger and sadness washing over me. "So she's not going to be a bridesmaid?" "No, but she's still planning to attend as a guest, in the white dress." My jaw dropped. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." Jake is furious. He told her she's no longer welcome at the ceremony or reception if she insists on wearing white, but she thinks he's bluffing. I sighed, feeling a headache coming on. This was not how I'd envisioned spending the hours before my wedding. "What does Jake want to do?" I asked. "He says it's up to you. He'll support whatever decision you make." I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to just let it go, to rise above Madison's pettiness and focus on marrying the man I loved. But another part knew that allowing this behavior would only encourage more of it in the future. If she shows up in that dress, she's not welcome, I decided. Jake and I are starting our marriage today, and we need to be united on this. My maid of honor nodded. "I'll let Jake know. And don't worry. If she tries anything, we've got security at the entrance." The next hour passed in a blur as I finished getting ready. Despite the drama with Madison, I felt a sense of calm knowing that Jake and I were facing this together. This was our first test as an almost married couple, and we were passing with flying colors. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4 p.m. At 3:45, as I was preparing to walk down the aisle, my wedding planner slipped into the room. "Emma, I hate to tell you this, but Madison is here, in the white dress. She's seated with the family in the front row." My heart sank. She'd really gone through with it. "What does Jake say?" I asked. He's livid. He asked her to leave again, but she made a scene, saying he was choosing some woman over his own sister. His parents are mortified but don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, gathering my courage. "Tell Jake I support whatever he decides. This is his family, and I know this is hard for him." The wedding planner nodded and slipped out. 5 minutes later, as I was making final adjustments to my veil, she returned. "Jake asked security to remove Madison," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. She's creating quite a scene, but they're handling it discreetly. I felt a pang of sadness mixed with relief. Is Jake okay? He seems fine, more concerned about you than anything. He said to tell you he loves you and can't wait to see you walk down the aisle. With those words, my anxiety melted away. Madison might have tried to cause drama, but in doing so, she'd only proven how strong Jake and I were together. The ceremony was beautiful. Walking down the aisle to Jake, seeing his face light up as our eyes met, it was everything I'd dreamed of. We said our vows, exchanged rings, and sealed our marriage with a kiss as our loved ones applauded. Madison's absence was noted, but not mourned. It was during the reception that I learned the full details of Madison's removal. Jake's college best friend pulled me aside to recount what had happened. You should have seen it, Emma, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. When security asked her to leave, she started screaming about how Jake was betraying her, how you'd poisoned him against his family. Jake was so calm, though. He just said, Madison, I love you, but you're disrespecting my wife and our marriage. Please leave now, or we'll have to have you escorted out. What did she do? I asked, morbidly curious. She tried to play the tears card first, sobbing about how much she loved him and how she'd always be there when I inevitably left. When that didn't work, she switched to threats, saying she'd tell everyone about Jake's troubled past if he didn't let her stay. I frowned. Jake doesn't have a troubled past. Exactly. It was empty threats and manipulation. When she realized nothing was working, she slapped him across the face and had to be physically removed by security. Jake's parents were mortified. I felt sick imagining the scene. Where is she now? No idea. Her boyfriend picked her up, I think. She was still crying when they drove away. I found Jake shortly after, pulling him aside to check on him. A faint red mark was visible on his cheek where Madison had slapped him. Are you okay? I asked, touching his face gently. He caught my hand and kissed it. Never better. I'm sorry about Madison. I had no idea she'd take things this far. Don't apologize. You handled it perfectly. I meant what I said, you know, he continued, his eyes serious. You're my wife now. My priority. If Madison can't respect that, she can't be part of our lives until she changes. I leaned into him, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. Thank you for standing up for us. The rest of the reception was perfect. We danced, cut the cake, and celebrated with the people who truly supported our union. Madison's dramatic exit became a distant memory as the night wore on. It wasn't until the next morning, as Jake and I were preparing to leave for our honeymoon, that the repercussions began. Jake's phone had been blowing up with texts and calls from his parents, who were now claiming I had overreacted to Madison's choice of attire. They say we humiliated her, Jake said, showing me the latest message. That kicking her out was too extreme and we should have just ignored the dress. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Do you think they're right? Jake shook his head firmly. Not at all. Madison knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't an innocent mistake. It was a deliberate attempt to undermine our wedding and hurt you. I have no regrets about how we handled it. Despite Jake's reassurance, the situation with his family continued to escalate. Madison had apparently told everyone who would listen that I was a bridezilla who had turned her brother against her over a simple dress. Some extended family members who hadn't attended the wedding were calling Jake, expressing concern that he'd changed since meeting me. We tried to ignore the drama as we enjoyed our honeymoon in Hawaii, but it cast a shadow over what should have been a purely joyful time. When we returned home 2 weeks later, the situation had only worsened. Madison had moved back in with her parents, claiming she was too traumatized by the wedding incident to live alone. She was now refusing to speak to Jake unless he cut ties with me, an ultimatum that was as ridiculous as it was hurtful. Jake's parents, while not explicitly taking Madison's side, were pressuring us to make peace for the sake of family harmony. This apparently meant I should apologize to Madison for the misunderstanding and invite her over for dinner to reconcile. There was no misunderstanding, I told Jake after a particularly tense phone call with his mother. She deliberately wore white to our wedding after being told not to, then caused a scene when asked to leave. Why am I the one who needs to apologize? Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. You don't. My parents are just... They've always catered to Madison's feelings. They think if they ignore her bad behavior, it will go away instead of getting worse. Well, that approach clearly isn't working, I pointed out. She's 26, not 16. This isn't normal sibling rivalry. It's obsessive and unhealthy. Jake nodded, pulling me into a hug. I know, and I won't let them make you feel like you're the problem here. Madison needs professional help, not more coddling. We stood our ground, refusing to apologize for establishing boundaries. This led to an increasingly strained relationship with Jake's parents, who couldn't understand why we wouldn't let bygones be bygones for the sake of family peace. 2 months after the wedding, things came to a head when Jake's parents invited us to Sunday dinner. We agreed, hoping that enough time had passed for emotions to cool. When we arrived, however, we found Madison sitting at the table, wearing, you guessed it, another white dress. Jake immediately turned to his parents. What is this? You know we're not ready to see Madison until she apologizes. His mother looked flustered. We thought if you two just talked face to face, everything could be resolved. Family is too important to throw away over a silly argument. This wasn't a silly argument, Jake said firmly. Madison deliberately tried to cause problems at our wedding, then physically assaulted me when asked to leave. That's not something we can just brush under the rug. Madison, who had been sitting silently until now, stood up. I can't believe you're still holding a grudge over a dress, Jake. It wasn't even that similar to Emma's. You've changed since you met her. The old Jake would never have chosen some girl over his sister. I felt Jake tense beside me. Emma isn't some girl, Madison. She's my wife. And the old Jake you're referring to was a teenager who didn't know how to stand up to your manipulation. I'm not that person anymore. Manipulation? Madison's voice rose to a shriek. I've done nothing but love and support you. Emma's the one who's manipulating you, turning you against your own family. Jake's father finally spoke up. That's enough, Madison. Jake is right. Your behavior at the wedding was inappropriate, and you owe them both an apology. Madison stared at her father in disbelief. You're taking their side now? After everything I've been through? This isn't about sides, he replied wearily. It's about acknowledging when you've done something wrong. Madison's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't believe this. My own family, betraying me. Fine. If that's how it's going to be, I don't want anything to do with any of you. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. An uncomfortable silence fell over the dining room. Jake's mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I'm sorry. I thought we could fix this. Jake sighed. Mom, I love you and Dad, but this isn't something a family dinner can fix. Madison needs help. Professional help. Her obsession with me and her hostility toward Emma aren't normal. We've tried to get her to see someone, his father admitted. After the wedding, we suggested therapy, but she refused. Said there was nothing wrong with her, that everyone else was the problem. I felt a pang of sympathy for Jake's parents. They were caught between their two children, trying desperately to keep the family together while navigating Madison's volatile behavior. We're not asking you to cut ties with Madison, I said gently. We understand she's your daughter and you love her. But Jake and I need boundaries. And right now, that means limited contact with her until she shows genuine remorse and willingness to change. Jake's parents nodded, seemingly relieved that we weren't asking them to choose sides permanently. We agreed to keep lines of communication open with them while maintaining distance from Madison. In the months that followed, Madison's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would alternate between sending Jake long, emotional texts declaring how much she missed him, and vicious messages accusing him of abandoning her. She created fake social media accounts to harass me, leaving comments about how I'd stolen her brother and ruined their family. We documented everything, eventually obtaining a restraining order when the harassment escalated to showing up at our home in the middle of the night. Jake's parents finally acknowledged that their daughter needed serious help and convinced her to start therapy, though her progress was slow and inconsistent. It's been a year since our wedding day, and the situation with Madison remains complicated. She's still in therapy, still struggling with boundaries, though the most extreme behavior has subsided. Jake and I maintain minimal contact with her, engaging only in supervised family gatherings where his parents can intervene if necessary. Some might say we overreacted to a white dress, that throwing Madison out of our wedding was too harsh a response to a fashion choice. But it was never about the dress. It was about respect, boundaries, and starting our marriage on a foundation of mutual support. Jake has never regretted standing by me that day, even though it caused a rift in his family. If anything, the experience brought us closer together, showing us both that we could count on each other when it mattered most. As for Madison, I hope someday she finds the help she needs to build a healthy relationship with her brother, one based on genuine love rather than possessiveness. Until then, we'll continue to protect our marriage from those who seek to undermine it, white dresses and all.